I didn't move when the pressure arrived. I shifted the weight without changing sides. The floor stayed cold, the lights stayed thin. I learned where standing ends and holding begins. Every sound asked me to choose. I answered by staying exactly where I was. My hands didn't open, they recalibrated. Grip softened but never released. Time leaned forward, expecting collapse. I leaned back just enough to remain. Nothing dramatic happened that day. No cracks, no breaks, no visible scene. But inside a quiet correction took place. A minor adjustment no one could see. I didn't move when the room tightened. I let the walls decide their distance. Breathe shortened, then found a rhythm, not calm, just usable. I noticed how weight teaches balance. If you stop trying to escape it, the moment didn't pass. It learned my outline instead. I stayed still long enough for the pressure to get familiar. What didn't move didn't disappear, it adapted. It adapted. It adapted. It adapted. Silence didn't arrive empty. It arrived already working. Nothing spoke, yet something counted. The room looked finished. The moment wasn't. I stood inside it, aware of being measured. Silence with a pulse, steady and deliberate. No sound crossed the space, but pressure did. I felt the rhythm before I trusted it. This wasn't calm, it was containment. Every second landed with equal weight. Silence with a pulse, never decorative. The air stayed thin, alert. My breath slowed down to avoid interference. I wasn't listening, I was registering. Silence with a pulse, quiet but awake. Nothing asked for response, nothing forgave. The wall stayed neutral, my body didn't. I felt movement without motion. Silence with a pulse, kept time accurately. No crescendo form, no drop followed. Just consistency, insistent. I noticed how often I confused noise with proof. moment watched back, patient. I didn't fill the space, I respected it. Silence with a pulse, contained energy, not waiting, maintaining every thought slow to avoid distortion. I felt the difference between quiet and absence. This was neither. Silence with a pulse, alive without display. The pressure stayed local, precise. I didn't scan for exits, there were none, only presence, measured. Silence with a pulse, refused interpretation. It existed without metaphor. I stood long enough to feel included. The rhythm didn't sing to me, I sing to it. Silence with a pulse, exact, no softness entered, no threat followed, just continuity, accurate. I stopped expecting relief and noticed structure. This was holding, not emptiness. Silence with a pulse kept its form. I felt it in my chest, subtle. A signal that stayed internal, controlled. Nothing broke the stillness, nothing needed to. Silence with a pulse, finished nothing. It stayed working until I did. I didn't resolve it, I aligned. The moment stayed intact because I didn't interrupt. Silence with a pulse, and I remained not calm, not tense, just present inside a living quiet. Silence with a pulse, and nothing else followed. That was the point. I stayed there long enough to understand. The door closed, but something remained. Not the sound, the aftermath. I stood where it ended, expecting relief. It didn't come, something stayed. The door closed, clean and final. The space learned quiet. I didn't. I felt the weight detach from the moment and stay with me. What stayed after the door didn't need a reason. It didn't ask permission. It occupied the hallway, emptied my chest, didn't. I waited for the echo to finish. It already had. What stayed after the door wasn't loud. It settled into corners I hadn't checked. My hands relaxed, the feeling didn't. The event ended, the residue didn't. What stayed after the door felt deliberate. Not punishment, not memory, just something unfinished, refusing to leave. I leaned against the wall, not for support, to feel where it stayed. What stayed after the door changed the room. Not visibly, internally, I noticed how absence can after the door. Waited, no instructions, no urgency. Trusted time more than I did. I replayed nothing, it remained anyway. What stayed after the door was patient. It didn't follow me, it accompanied. Every step carried its outline. I checked for cracks, none appeared. What stayed after the door was intact. I stopped naming it. Names make things move. This needed stillness. The silence held, but not enough. What stayed after the door adjusted with me. When I slowed, it softened. When I rushed, it tightened. It was accurate. What stayed after the door didn't accuse, it observed. I felt it most when I pretended I didn't. The space learned distance, the weight learned proximity. What stayed after the door resisted closure, not stubborn, honest. Some things don't end when you want them to, they end when they're understood. What stayed after the door taught restraint. I didn't force release, I waited. Time thinned it slowly. What stayed after the door never announced departure. One moment it was there, then it wasn't. No ceremony, no relief, just space, returning to normal. I stood longer than necessary to be sure the door remained closed. The weight didn't come back. What stayed after the door left without explanation, because it didn't know one. I stayed intact, not light, just accurate again. The door closed, something stayed, then eventually nothing did. And that was the end of it. It didn't hurt at first, that was the problem. I stayed because nothing burned, because nothing warned me. The moment felt safe until it wasn't a moment anymore. I was held, but not when I needed it. Held in the wrong moment is a quiet mistake. It doesn't break you, it misplaces you. I leaned into it thinking timing would follow, it didn't. Held in the wrong moment feels almost right. That's how it survives. My body relaxed, my instincts didn't. Something kept count, even when I stopped. I was held after the decision, after the shift, after the truth moved on. Held in the wrong moment is support that arrives late. Kind but ineffective, I thanked it anyway, that was my error. The past has strong arms, it holds without asking. I noticed how comfort can become delayed. Held in the wrong moment keeps you standing still, not frozen, paused. I kept waiting for alignment, it never came. It never came, the grip was gentle, the timing was cruel. I adjusted my breathing to fit what had passed. The wrong moment teaches patience the wrong way. I mistook endurance for strength. The moment wanted movement, I offer stillness. Held in the wrong moment feels like loyalty. was just attachment to a shape that changed. I stayed longer than the situation required because the hold felt familiar. Held in the wrong moment doesn't release you. You have to step away from it yourself. That's the part no one tells you. I loosened my shoulders before my mind agreed. The space resisted, I didn't. Held in the wrong moment, left marks I couldn't see. Time and bruises quietly. I carried that delay into other rooms. It showed up when I hesitate. Held in the wrong moment, echoes forward, not loudly, precisely. I learned to ask, not am I held, but is this now? That question changed everything. Held in the wrong moment, lost its grip when I moved on time. No anger, no regret, just accuracy returning. I stepped out of it without drama. The moment stayed behind. Held in the wrong moment and ended when I chose the present. Nothing chased me, that's how I knew I was finally free. Waiting wasn't empty, it had edges. I didn't notice at first how carefully it formed me. I thought I was pausing, I was being taught. Waiting has weight when it lasts. It presses without noise, it instructs without language. I learned where to place my hands when nothing arrived. I learned how to stand without leaning forward. Waiting shaped my posture, slowly, precisely. I stopped asking when and started asking how. How long can a breath stay useful? How still can hope remain honest? Waiting answered by not answering. Days passed, but something stayed active. My attention sharpened, my patience dulled. Waiting teaches contrast, everything becomes louder inside. I noticed my thoughts pacing, they wore paths into me. Waiting as corners I kept bumping into. Each delay carved a boundary, each silence left a line. I learned the shape of waiting by fitting inside it. Not comfortably, correctly. I adjusted my expectations like furniture in a small room. Nothing extra survived, only what was necessary. Waiting made me economical with words, with feelings. I stopped rehearsing outcomes, they dissolved on arrival. Waiting doesn't promise arrival, it promises endurance. I learned how longing stretches without tearing, how disappointment can soften instead of harden. Waiting trained my eyes to recognize almost moments, almost movements. I learned to read absence as information. Waiting speaks in subtraction. You hear it when you listen. I noticed how time slows when watched too closely, so I looked elsewhere, that helped. Waiting gave me rhythm, not progress. A pulse without direction, a beat without a song. I learned how gotta sit with it, not fight it. Waiting isn't passive, it's discipline, restraint. It asks you not to reach. I learned the shape of waiting when my hands stop shaking, when my urgency learned manners. Waiting smooth my reactions, file down my impulses. It didn't make me calm, it made me exact. I learned what deserves patience by seeing what didn't survive it. Some desires left, they weren't meant to stay. Waiting clarified priority quietly. I stopped chasing echoes, they never return correctly. Waiting holds a mirror that doesn't flatter. It shows you what you do when nothing happens. I learned that part of myself, it was unfamiliar. Waiting stripped performance, left posture. I noticed how often I rushed to avoid stillness. Waiting removed that escape. I learned to occupy time without filling it. That was the hardest shape. Waiting has a center. I finally found it. Not peace, balance. I learned the shape of waiting when it stopped feeling temporary, when it became a place and I realized I could leave it whenever I was ready. That knowledge changed everything. Waiting didn't, but it loosened. The shape remained, I just stopped fitting inside it. I noticed it in the pause, not relief, continuation. My chest kept moving, but nothing softened. Breathing stayed, pressure stayed with it. I wasn't drowning, I wasn't floating either. Air came in without permission, went out without resolution. Still breathing meant nothing ended. It just proved I was still inside it. My lungs did their job even when I didn't agree. I waited for ease and it never arrived. Breathe after breath, the same weight repeated. Not heavier, not lighter. Consistency became the strain. Still breathing isn't a victory, it's maintenance. It's maintenance. I learned that survival has no applause. It happens quietly, relentlessly. Each inhale said continue, each exhale refused comfort. My body cooperated while my thoughts resisted. I stayed upright out of habit, not whole. Breathing became mechanical, like a task left unfinished. No crescendo, no release, just proof that time hadn't stopped. I listened for calm, found none, only circulation. Still breathing, I counted nothing. Not seconds, not progress. I stopped asking my body to feel better. I asked it to stay functional, that was enough. Death doesn't promise healing, it promises presence. I stayed present against my preference. Air-filled spaces that emotions wouldn't. My ribs expanded around something unresolved. Still breathing felt like an argument between endurance and exhaustion. I learned how thin the line is between coping and continuing. Breathe, crossed it without hesitation. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because I could. Still breathing, kept the room intact, kept the day intact. I didn't ease, I endured. That distinction mattered. Breathing didn't fix me, it held me together. That was its only role, and it did it perfectly again. The morning felt lighter, but nothing had changed. Same walls, same breath. The weight shifted slightly, not enough to leave, just enough to be noticed. I stood still, waiting for proof, waiting for it to go. The air moved differently, like it was considering me. Not helping, not hurting, almost lifting is a dangerous state. It teaches hope without commitment. My shoulders adjusted before my mind did. I didn't trust it. Relief that arrives quietly rarely stays. I watch the day from a distance. Sunlight touched things it never fixed. I felt space between thoughts, a gap, brief. That was the almost. The weight loosened its grip for a second, like testing my reaction. I didn't react, I froze. The moment hovered, undecided, then settled back into place. Nothing dramatic happened, that was the problem. No release, no fall, just a suggestion of freedom. I carried that suggestion all day. It made the weight heavier because now I knew the difference. I learned how close it could come and how intentionally it stayed. Almost lifting, felt like a warning, not a promise. My body remembered it even when it passed. Muscles stayed alert, waiting again. That day taught me restraint. Not everything that shifts leaves, not every pause becomes peace. I stopped chasing the lift, I respected its absence, because the weight returned exactly as before. But now I recognized its shape. The day didn't change me, it exposed the margin between endurance and expectation. I lived there briefly, then stepped back into consistency. The weight settled, the day moved on, and I understood. Almost is still staying. care before language, before I tried to explain. A presence without edges, a way without a title. I carried it carefully as if naming it would wake it. So I didn't, it pressed inward, not violently, consistently. Like hands that never tighten, but never leave. I felt it in decisions I avoided, in pauses that lasted too long. Pressure doesn't always shout, sometimes it waits. I learned to move around it, never through it. I adjusted posture, not circumstance. My back remembered what my mouth refused. I never named because names invite questions, and I didn't want answers. I wanted distance. The pressure stayed neutral. There was its power. It didn't demand, it assumed. I lived inside that assumption. The days passed normally. That's how it hit. No one asks about something that looks functional. I perform these while compressing internally. The pressure noticed it stayed quiet, it respected my silence. I felt it in my jaw, in my hands, in the way I held objects too carefully. It shaped my habits without permission. Still I avoided giving it form. Naming makes things real. I wasn't ready. The pressure became familiar, almost cooperative. It didn't hurt, it restricted. The difference mattered. Pain asked for reaction, pressure asked for adjustment. I adjusted everything. Sleep positions, tone, expectations. The pressure watched me adapt. I mistook that for control. But unnamed things don't disappear, they embed, they learn you. The pressure learned where I've been, where I don't. It settled there, patient. I carried it so long, it felt structural, like part of the frame. Only later did I realize it was never mine. I was just the space it occupied. Pressure I never named, never left. It didn't need to, it was already inside, perfectly fitted. Still pressing, still unnamed. Still unnamed. It didn't arrive loudly, it was already there. By the time I noticed, it had chosen its place. Nothing shifted when it stayed. That was a sign. Things that announce themselves usually leave. This one didn't, it rested without permission, without urgency, like something that knew time was on its side. I checked the room, the hours, everything looked normal. That's how it stayed, by blending in. The weight never argued, it didn't need to. It leaned just enough to be unavoidable. I learned to measure days by how I carried it. Some mornings it felt lighter, that worried me more. When weight pretends to leave, it's usually testing you. I didn't celebrate, I stayed still. The weight respected that it never punished movement, only denial. If I ignored it, it pressed. If I acknowledged it, it settled. We developed a language without words. Pressure meant weight, stillness meant content. I stopped asking how long. The question weakened structure. The weight preferred certainty, even uncomfortable certainty. I built routines around it, not defenses, accommodations. My posture changed, my pace adjusted. I became precise. The weight sharpened me, not gently but honestly. It showed me where effort leaks, where intention collapses. Every choice felt heavier but clearer. I stopped reaching for relief. Relief disrupts balance. The weight stayed because I stopped asking it to go. Some things remain out of respect. It didn't break me, that was important. It tested low bearing, not limits. I learned the difference between collapse and endurance. The weight watched me learn. It didn't interfere, it observed. When others asked what was wrong, I said nothing. Not because I couldn't speak, because the weight was doing its work. It taught me patience without softness. It taught me stillness without peace. The days became quieter but not empty. The weight filled the silence perfectly. I stopped imagining the least that fantasy weakens grip. Instead I adjusted my center. The weight approved, it didn't grow lighter. I grew accurate, that mattered more. When things finally changed, the weight didn't move. It didn't need to, it had already shaped what would survive the change. I didn't lose it, I didn't escape it. I carried it forward, integrated, not as burden, as proof. The weight that stayed